Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating piece of fundamentalist Christian literature titled What Has God Revealed About Truth? We are going to impartially unpack this source material to understand exactly how it constructs its worldview, how it looks at modern society, and what it ultimately demands of its followers. So, what is truth? It's a massive question, right? It's actually the famous question posed by Pontius Pilate to Jesus, and it serves as the absolute perfect hook for this text. The source uses this exact historical moment to set a deeply philosophical tone for everything that follows. It basically argues that we are living in an era where this specific question is more relevant and, honestly, more contested than ever before. Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll be breaking this down into 5 parts. 1. Defining absolute truth. 2. The shift to postmodernism. 3. The cost of relativism. 4. Truth embodied in God. And finally, 5. Freedom and practical application. Let's jump right in. Starting off with Section 1, Defining Absolute Truth. This is really the source's foundational premise. Now, right out of the gate, the definition of truth in this worldview is completely uncompromising. It is strictly defined as that which conforms to fact or reality. It's not a vibe, it's not a passing feeling, and it's certainly not your lived experience. According to the text, it is an undeniable, fundamental law that aligns perfectly with ultimate objective reality. And because of that incredibly rigid baseline, the author leaves absolutely zero room for a gray area. You basically have 2 options. You are either dealing in truth, which is characterized as faithful, reliable, and sincere, or you are operating in falsehood, which is defined entirely by lies, distortion, and misrepresentation. There's no middle ground here. You are either walking in pure authenticity or total deception. Moving on to Section 2, the shift to postmodernism. Let's see how the text views our cultural history. This part is pretty fascinating. The author maps out this chronological timeline of who society actually trusts to give them the truth. We start back in the traditional era where truth was mediated by the preacher and the Bible. Makes sense, right? Then we move to the modern era where scientists and philosophers take the wheel. But notice the postmodern era. The author argues that today, ultimate truth is mediated by rock musicians and MTV. It's a really striking view of exactly who holds the cultural megaphone right now. To vividly illustrate this perceived spiritual descent, the text leans on a quote from Doug McLaughlin. He says, "First there was truth as defined by God, then there was truth as defined by man, and finally there was no truth." It's a powerful, punchy summary of the author's perspective on humanity's journey, starting from absolute certainty and slipping down into complete nihilism. Which brings us to Section 3, the cost of relativism. This covers the perceived dangers of a truthless society. From the author's perspective, society has made a really dangerous trade. We've swapped absolute truth for what they call radical relativism and pluralism. Now, the author doesn't see relativism as tolerance, not at all. They see it as a subjective, anything-goes mentality that inherently destroys authority and moral foundations. Treating all contradictory beliefs as equally valid, that is framed here as a direct attack on Christian ethics. So the crucial point is that this trade sets off a very specific domino effect. Let's walk through this logical chain. Step 1, if there is no God, then step 2, there is no lawgiver. And without a lawgiver, you lose the standard. Lose the standard, you lose absolute truth. And when truth finally falls, morality completely collapses. It is presented as a mathematical certainty that rejecting a divine creator leads straight to the total unraveling of ethics. To really anchor this severe warning, the author highlights Proverbs 29:18, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." In the context of this specific source material, this biblical citation is used to argue that civilizations don't just naturally evolve or transition when they experience a truth deprivation. They literally unravel at the seams. All right, shifting gears to Section 4, Truth Embodied in God. This is the theological solution. This is where we hit the theological core of the explainer, and the claim here is super direct. The text asserts that truth isn't just some abstract concept or a dusty set of philosophical rules, it is objective and perfectly personified in the figure of Jesus Christ. The author holds that absolute truth corresponds directly, literally one-to-one, with the divine nature of God himself. And since truth is viewed as divine, it comes with a few unyielding rules attached to it. First, it doesn't change with time. What was true 2,000 years ago is exactly as true today. Second, it does not change with culture or geography. But pay close attention to this last point. Truth is discovered, not invented, meaning it exists completely independently of us, and there is no way it can be altered by human opinion, new laws, or whatever the current societal trend happens to be. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate clash of worldviews for the author. On one side, you've got the postmodern view, specifically calling out philosopher Richard Rorty's idea that truth is basically just a social construct, something manipulated by groups trying to gain power. But on the other side, the biblical view. This insists that truth is an objective reality, entirely revealed by God and perfectly knowable to humanity. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Freedom and Practical Application. Let's look at the mandates for believers. Things get incredibly practical here. The text defines a true disciple as someone who actively mimics, imitates, or copies the lessons and lifestyle of their teacher. It argues that genuine faith is not just a one-and-done intellectual belief. No, it is proven by a person's absolute continuity in holding and actually living out this rigid truth day in and day out. Now here is a twist in the author's logic that might surprise you. While modern society might look at these strict rules and see them as restrictive, this text argues they are actually deeply liberating. Check this out. Knowing the biblical truth about God frees you from idolatry. The truth about man frees you from humanism. The truth about creation frees you from evolution. And the truth about salvation frees you from false religion. The whole argument is that absolute truth isn't a cage. It's actually the ultimate escape hatch from worldly illusions. So what are the actual boots-on-the-ground mandates for the believer? Well, they're pretty strict. Christians are demanded to love the truth, to tell it always, to tell it regardless of the personal or social cost, to keep their word, and to be completely sincere. It is a resounding, uncompromising call for radical integrity in a world that the text views as inherently deceptive. The text wraps up its entire argument with one last scripture, Proverbs 23:23, "Buy the truth and sell it not." It's essentially an urgent plea to a new generation, urging them to hold tenaciously to absolute truth. The demand is simple: refuse to compromise it, refuse to sell it off, no matter how high the societal price or cultural pressure might get. Which leaves all of us with a pretty profound question to chew on after unpacking all of this. How do you navigate the concepts of absolute versus relative truth in your own life? In a culture that is just rapidly changing all the time, where exactly do you anchor your reality? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.